Awesome. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining. My name is Connor Handy. I'm a friend of the Shankle Clinic, and I will be facilitating this evening's presentation by Dr. Shankle and the Q&A that will follow. I believe this is our 7th or 8th in this webinar series by the Shankle Clinic. So thank you to all of you participants who continue to show up and make this worthwhile. And thank you, Dr. Shankle, obviously, for continuing to share your wisdom with all of us. So just a few quick notes, housekeeping items to start. First, our session will start with a brief presentation by Dr. Shankle, and then we'll open up to Q&A, as I mentioned. If you have questions that you'd like Dr. Shankle to answer, please use the Q&A function within Zoom. You should have a button at the bottom of your screen that you can click on and type a question that will come directly to me. And then when we're in the Q&A session, I will raise those questions in order with Dr. Shankle. And we'll try to get to as many of those as we have time for. If we don't get to yours, I will relay it separately to Dr. Shankle, and hopefully we can follow up on a separate call or the next webinar. Video and audio are disabled for attendees, so that's why you're not seeing yourself, and know that we cannot see or hear you. But comments or questions can similarly be directed to the Q&A function. Those will come directly to me. And lastly, we're going to post a recording of the webinar on YouTube, and it'll be accessible via the Shankle Clinic website within the next couple weeks. So stay tuned for that if you want to watch this again, or if you know someone who wasn't able to attend tonight that wants to tune in later and see what we were talking about, or maybe watch Dr. Shankle and I on 1.5 speed. They can do that via the YouTube video. So that's the housekeeping. We'll move to a quick introduction of Dr. Shankle for those of you who aren't familiar with him. So Dr. William Shankle is one of the country's leading experts in Alzheimer's and other age-related neurodegenerative conditions. He's spent over 3 decades treating patients fighting these diseases, conducting research to advance our knowledge of the brain, and developing new treatments to delay or prevent the progression of cognitive impairment. In 1997, Dr. Shankle founded the Shankle Clinic, a neurology practice headquartered in Newport Beach, focused on the management and treatment of neurodegenerative conditions. Prior to founding the Shankle Clinic, Dr. Shankle served as the clinical director for the Alzheimer's Research Center at UC Irvine, which he co-founded. He also served as the director of Memory and Cognitive Disorders Program at Hoag Neurosciences Institute. Currently, in addition to leading the Shankle Clinic, Dr. Shankle serves as the Chief Medical Officer for MBIC Corporation. He's a research fellow with Hoag Memorial Hospital, and he's a clinical PI for a 5-year NIH grant with UCI. And he's the medical director for the Orange County Vital Brain Aging Program. Tonight, Dr. Shankle will be giving us a lecture titled "The Impact of Lifestyle on Treating Alzheimer's." And without further ado, I will pass the baton to Dr. Shankle. So, Doc, go ahead and come off mute, and I'm going to make you the host as well. So you should be able to start sharing your screen.
Can you see me now?
We can see you and hear you. Yes, thank you.
And then to switch over, I just do the share screen.
Just share screen, and I will confirm that it's popped up.
All right, here we go.
There it is.
All right, so let me go ahead and I can turn this on. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Good to go.
Thank you for taking time tonight. I'd like to tell you, are the images large enough to be able to read?
They're pretty small.
Okay,
But if I look closely at my screen, I can read them.
okay.
But
I'm
yeah,
sure if I can make them larger, but I'll explain them. Uh, we, a number of years ago, we met with a group that are some of the world researcher authorities in how the body metabolizes uh, food and byproducts of the organs. And it's now a very hot field called metabolomics, genomics, proteomics. And this became a very important way to evaluate what's happening in disease states, as well as how treatments affect the way a disease behaves. So we put together a study that was an attempt to replicate the findings of something called the finger study, which was done by Mia Kivi-Pelto in Finland. And she showed that in a nationwide study that exercise, diet, mentally stimulating activities, and good healthcare, managing your existing medical problems, had a very significant impact on people with dementia. In the United States, there was also replication of this study. And so we decided to apply the principle of examining the effect of lifestyle on treating Alzheimer's and other degenerative diseases, and adding in the additional information that one can obtain from blood tests that measure the breakdown products of a disease state, as well as the impact of the effect of treatment, in this case, lifestyle. So what you see are some kind of a pinwheel. And then in the center, it says the COCO study. That was the name of the study. Does how you live matter? And the things I'm going to talk to you about are the exercise components, the fuel, the nutrition, the parts of the system, which is basically managing your health, the way to make it happen, which would be the use of someone that could be considered to be a coach that helps you implement and actually comply with a change in lifestyle. We all have things that we could do a little bit better, and sometimes it's hard to change. So it's often helpful to get a trainer or a coach to actually help us make that change. And then finally was what happens as a result of that. So this was a study that we did over a 2-year period, and to give you kind of a concept of why this could work. I'll just briefly talk about what we call the body-mind system. And the body-mind system is basically, imagine that this odd-shaped geometric structure, which is actually called a permutohedron. For those of you who are interested, I'll be happy to talk to you on the side about that. But it is a way of representing the human body in terms of its organs, the kidneys, the lungs, the immune system, the gut, the brain. And from various studies about how systems behave, we know that all the parts of a system, they work together. And if one part of the system is damaged, the other parts will compensate to help maintain the output of the system. And if you think about it, the output of the human system is behavior. So this is a product of the mind, which in a sense is regulating the parts of the system, which are your organs and your immune system, your hormones, etc. And they're all working together to maintain that normal function. And so if there's damage to any of the parts, the rest of the system is going to adapt to try to maintain normal function. And that's what we do as we get older and the parts age, and they are all working together to keep function normal. So this is the whole concept of a system. And if we look at, let's see, the COCO study took the combination of dietary recommendations, basically the Mediterranean diet, the fruits, vegetables, berries, fish, chicken, a fairly low intake of saturated fat, and then combine that with helping maintain a regular amount of exercise, plus in addition to that, a cognitive training program called Brain HQ. It was originally developed by Michael Merzenich, who won the Nobel Prize in brain plasticity, how you actually grow new connections in the brain. And so he applied that fundamental research to building a cognitive training program called Brain HQ. For those of you who don't know about it or are interested, it's quite powerful. If you were to do 15 minutes of this cognitive training exercise, after 40 hours of that exercise, there's been shown to be a 10-year improvement in memory. I think that's pretty impressive. 40 hours takes at 15 minutes a day, about 4 to 5 months. And it persists for at least 2 years. So it's kind of like you do your 40 hours, you get a 10-year improvement, and then you wait a couple of years and then you do it again. Now, all of this is accompanied by the maintaining the parts, which is basically good healthcare, making sure existing medical conditions are in fact well controlled. And the value of having a coach is that you're accountable to somebody and they make sure that you're trying to, stay with the program. And as you know, compliance is often difficult over a long period of time. So this is what happened, and they randomly assigned people from the Shankle Clinic to either this treatment, we call this the treatment group, and then they also provided to control patients similar recommendations without a coach. So they did have access to the same information, but there was no need to report to somebody or be accountable. And then they compared the course of these individuals over a 2-year period. And about periodically, they would draw blood for chemistries, the metabolomics, the proteomics, the genome. We also did cognitive testing, and as well as MRI. And over the course of the 2 years, these measures were put together and then analyzed. And the result was quite impressive. What you see here is a dotted blue line, which was the result of the treatment group, and a solid blue line, which was the result of the control group. Now, this is a measure of memory called the Memory Performance Index. And it you can see that the dotted blue line is higher than the solid blue line. Well, that dotted blue line indicated that the treatment group subjects complying with the lifestyle recommendations, they stabilized over at least 2 years. And these are people who, in fact, did have Alzheimer's disease and often another dementing disorder. Whereas individuals who simply received the recommendations but didn't necessarily getting any enforcement to comply with the recommendations, you can see that they showed a much more significant decline in their memory over the same 2-year period. So if you wonder, well, how big of a treatment effect is this? Well, it turns out that this treatment effect, just from lifestyle, is larger than the treatment effect just recently reported for the newly approved FDA drug Leqembi for Alzheimer's disease. So one can certainly do a cost-benefit analysis. If you think about, oh, what would it cost me to have a coach to, kind of help me stay on track with lifestyle and diet recommendations? Let's say it's about $100 a week, be on the high side. So that could be about $5,000 a year. Now, if you were to buy or get the Leqembi drug, which is the one the FDA recently approved, it has a base cost of $36,000 a year. It also requires an infusion service. So you get injected at least once a month and maybe every 2 weeks by an infusion service. You also have some additional risks. If you have Alzheimer's, there's a 40% chance you also have one of the misfolded proteins, amyloid, in your blood vessels. And the amyloid in the blood vessels, it makes them weak and they become fragile and they start to leak. This is called cerebral amyloid angiopathy. And in individuals who then get Leqembi, which is infused intravenously, it can act like someone who goes up to a dike and starts pulling out all the plugs that are keeping the dam from bursting. And the risk of a hemorrhage of the brain is quite significant. It's downplayed in the clinical trials, but the risk is still about 5 to 10% of individuals will get these bleeds. And in the general population, I think we would expect that that rate will be in fact higher and that it will be prescribed to people who are at much higher risk for having an intracerebral hemorrhage, which would then basically nullify the effects of any benefits of the treatment. Furthermore, Leqembi only removes one of the misfolded proteins in Alzheimer's, the amyloid. And so if you happen to have the other misfolded proteins, the tangles, for example, it is not going to stop them from progressing. So there's some real question marks in my mind about the true benefit, unless one can already show that, one, there is no cerebral amyloid angiopathy, two, that you don't already have tangles. And I think that given that the lifestyle treatment doesn't carry those types of risks, and the treatment effect is actually larger than Leqembi, this is quite an exciting result. So this is a slide that shows groups of the different breakdown products, the so-called metabolites and the protein products. And you can see there's kind of 3 or 4 main areas of clusters of certain metabolites or breakdown products that really differ between the treatment group and the control group. The larger the size of the colored blobs, the greater the treatment effect. And it makes a lot of sense, actually, if you kind of know about the various breakdown products. But probably the one that most people are aware of is albumin, which is egg white. Albumin is the largest protein in the blood, and it provides a number of different functions. But one of its more important functions is that it transports all sorts of proteins to their target organs. So it turns out that there are real big differences in albumin breakdown products in people who respond to the in the treatment group, people who did much better. So I'll just briefly end by pointing out that the reason that we think Alzheimer's and other diseases might respond to lifestyle interventions is that lifestyle is fundamental in providing basic components to your system, your body, your brain. And the system requires that it become built and it be repaired when there's damage. The fundamental building blocks of the system, the parts of the system, are proteins. And this shows an example of a protein being made and then folded into the shape that it needs to perform its job as a part of the cell. The next slide on the right-hand slide shows a picture of a cell with some red circles. Those red circles represent proteins that may have been damaged by some condition. On the left-hand side, you see common disorders that, if they are not well controlled, will in fact damage cells. And when they damage cells, they're damaging protein. These are very common things: glaucoma, hearing loss, arthritis, hormonal problems like thyroid, immune system problems, infection, COVID, anemia, heart problems, high blood pressure, sleep apnea, cholesterol problems, gut problems like Crohn's or colitis, diabetes, stress, we all get that, kidney cancer, toxins, air pollution. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that can stress out cells and damage the proteins. So in order for a cell to keep alive and keep functioning properly, it has to be repaired. So what happens is that the cell makes a new protein to replace the damaged one. It folds it, and then it transports it and replaces the damaged protein. Now, this is all fine and goes on throughout life, and nothing goes wrong as long as the damage can be repaired. But if the ongoing damage to the cells exceeds the repair capacity of your cells, then you start to see misfolding of these proteins, so they don't form the proper shape. And on the right-hand side, you can see examples of what these misfolded proteins actually look like. Now, when they develop, they have a tendency. Here's an example on the left-hand side. On the left-hand side, you can see an example of a misfolded protein combined with, it's actually several misfolded proteins aggregated together, one with a core of something called amyloid, and then there are some purple misfolded proteins that attach to it. And when that happens, these aggregates, they naturally bind to nerve cell membranes and cell membranes in general, and they interfere with the function of the membrane. If they are not removed or gotten rid of, then they can cause permanent damage and the cell will die. On the right-hand side, you see another defense system that exists, and that's your immune system. Your immune system, it recognizes foreign proteins, it recognizes damage, it recognizes things that are harmful to you. And it then makes an antibody that will bind to whatever is harmful and get rid of it. This is in fact why, if you have noticed that on TV, you will often see advertisements about various drugs made for different conditions, and many of them end with letters MAB or MAB, infliximab, etc. And these are all antibodies that the pharmaceutical companies have developed that attack misfolded proteins found in a whole variety of diseases, bind to them and remove them. So this concept is quite familiar. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is to point out something very fundamental, and that's that if in Alzheimer's disease, not only is there just one form of amyloid, there are many forms, and each form has a different shape that's shown on the right-hand side. These different shapes require different antibodies to recognize them. So in a single individual, you will often find individuals with 20, 30, 40, 50 different antibodies that are required to recognize all of the misfolded proteins in the brain that are thought to be the cause of all degenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's disease. So the concept that making a single antibody is going to bind to all these different shapes, it just isn't correct. So a drug like Leqembi will bind to some of the antibodies, but it won't, it will bind to some of the misfolded proteins, but it's not going to bind to all of them. And this may be why the treatment effects are modest at the very best. Another issue that is important to realize is that we talk about Alzheimer's disease, but most of the time, people don't have just Alzheimer's. We showed in a sample of about 600 patients that only about 6% or 7% of the patients who met all criteria for Alzheimer's disease had just Alzheimer's. 93% had Alzheimer's plus another degenerative disease. So when you think about treating individuals like this, if you just treat Alzheimer's, you're still not treating the whole disease. And this is a concept that has not been really broadly accepted in the community. And it's an issue because if you're going to make treatments, you need to treat the whole disease process, not just part of it, or the results are not going to be as good. So I will stop there. I think that it's exciting that we have identified that providing the energy and the nutrients needed to keep cells able to fight back and keep repairing the damage is quite powerful, and it's as good as anything that the pharmaceutical companies have come up with so far.
Great. Thank you, Doc. At this point, we don't have any questions that have been submitted by the crowd. So I'll give people a second in case there was anything that they heard, or if they were so intently listening to Dr. Shankle that they didn't have a time yet to type in their question, but have something on their mind. We'll give you a minute to do that. Otherwise, we may be able to wrap things a little bit early here. So they're coming in now. Okay. One pretty specific question. How many types of misfolded protein antigens does Privigen affect? So a specific drug. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Good question. So the Privigen is not the one that you hear about on TV. That's called Previgen. Privigen is a source of antibodies that physicians can prescribe. And these antibodies are derived from thousands of human blood donors. They are purified and extracted and made sure that they're not contaminated by any viruses. Because they're derived from thousands of blood donors, they contain antibodies from all those blood donors. So they're not specific to the misfolded proteins that you find in Alzheimer's or in Lewy body disease and Parkinson's and ALS and in every other brain disease and in other degenerative diseases of the body, like in diabetes. So you get a kind of a random sample of many different antibodies, and the odds are fairly high that the ones you get will recognize a significant proportion of the ones that you have. The disadvantage of that approach is that 1% of the antibodies in Privigen are targeting misfolded proteins in the brain. So you're not getting 100% that are targeting misfolded proteins, but you're getting a broad range of antibodies that do recognize the different types of misfolded proteins that a person has. Whereas with something like Leqembi, you're getting 100%, but it's of a single antibody. So it'll only recognize one group of shapes. And that's, to me, that's why I think we haven't seen larger treatment effects with that approach.
Awesome. Okay. Next one. Okay, so someone just asked to see the lifestyle summary slide again. So I don't know if while you're answering some other questions, if you want to, I might have to make you the host again.
Sure.
Make host. Change host. Okay. You should be able to pop that up.
I wonder if it's this one. Maybe that one.
Oh, you're not sharing screen yet.
Yeah, let me share the screen. Might be this one, I'm not sure. There we go. This would be the one with the actual interventions.
The lifestyle summary slide.
Okay.
Maybe it was the one with your cool with the web, the pinwheel, maybe.
Oh,
Perhaps, I'm not sure exactly.
First line,
okay.
first line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe that's it. Anyway, okay, yeah, keep that up while we go answer a few other questions. Are lifestyle changes helpful in preventing the folded proteins or misfolded proteins, especially when your family has AD history? And
Oh,
all,
that's a very good question. I'm glad it was brought up because the answer is absolutely. There was a great study in Sweden where they have a national twin registry. And what they did was they looked at genetically identical twins, and they looked at the onset of Alzheimer's disease in both of them, both twin pairs. And what they found was that 13% of the identical twins differed in their age of onset of Alzheimer's by 15 years. Now, this basically means that if you have exactly the same genes, okay, that what you do can alter the course of Alzheimer's by 15 years. And I, in fact, had a patient and her identical twin that one of them, they both had the highest genetic risk there is for Alzheimer's. It's what are called the 2 ApoE4 genes. It makes them about 10 times more likely to get Alzheimer's. And it's because the rate of amyloid production, the first misfolded protein seen in Alzheimer's, that rate is tripled with one E4 gene, and it goes up 9-fold with 2 E4 genes. So both of these ladies had strong family history. One of them was very proactive, and she dieted, exercised, kept good care of her health, and engaged in lifelong learning. Her sister was kind of took the opposite track, kind of said, I don't want to know, I don't want to find out, just leave me alone. And she didn't take care of her health, didn't exercise, smoked, drank too much. And they differed in their age of onset of Alzheimer's by 15 years. So I had a direct experience, and it really impacted me how important lifestyle is. In fact, I try to play an hour to an hour and a half of tennis every day, and have switched my diet to being a bunny rabbit.
love it. Okay. Let's see, moving on here. Someone asked, how do I find a coach? So you mentioned the impact that a coach can have on helping to kind of motivate people and improve your health and your lifestyle. I don't know if you have any coaches in mind that you'd recommend, Doc, or
Yes.
consider that.
There's actually the lead coach for the COCO study. Her name is Molly Raposo. If we should be able to get her email address. She was coaching people from she coaches people all over the country. So it's very conveniently done by internet. And we'd be happy to provide that contact for people. She's an excellent coach.
Okay, I'm trying to let's see. I've got her profile up. I'll try and find her.
See if I can find that. See if I can put it up on a chat. No.
Pacific Neurosciences Institute. Okay, yeah. Well,
Molly Raposo is her name.
yeah, I've got her held here. I'll just
Oh, okay.
I think if I post in the chat, let's see. Okay, I just linked to her profile, which I think should have her contact information on there in case people want to reach out to her. Oh, so yeah, check the chat out for that. Okay, another somewhat specific question. Do you recommend the use of lecanemab, another monoclonal antibody?
Yes, the compound I was talking about was lecanemab. Its brand name is Leqembi, and I think that there are some circumstances where it could be useful, but the main thing, one, is that it only blocks amyloid, and it only blocks some of the amyloid, not all of it, because amyloid can form many, many different shapes. And this is a single antibody against a single group of shapes. So that is not what Alzheimer's is. Alzheimer's results in amyloid producing a variety of shapes. And so only some of the shapes are going to be bound by lecanemab. Secondly, it's intravenously administered. That means that only 1/10 of 1% of those antibodies get into the brain. I've never understood why brain diseases are being treated by intravenous administration. It makes no sense at all. And it exposes people to the risk of a brain hemorrhage when that could be avoided by using a route that doesn't go through the blood. There's also the additional factor of a cost of about $36,000 a year for just the drug, plus the cost of an infusion service. And I think that, if you only have amyloid and you're willing and able to take, afford that, plus you don't have cerebral amyloid angiopathy, then it becomes a viable option.
Okay, great. Let's see. At what stage of Alzheimer's were the study population when they entered the lifestyle study? Do you know that?
Yes, these were individuals who had either mild cognitive impairment or had mild dementia. So it would be a fairly standard group of individuals that engaged in the lifestyle program at typically when they were diagnosed.
Great.
Oh, the age ranged anywhere from 50 to 90 years old.
Got it. If a person has had a CSF, so that's a cerebral spinal fluid draw, will their test results show all the different things hinted at in the last slide? And what can that person do about the results to help slow their AD? I know you have, first, before you answer that, I know that Dr. Shankle has lots of thoughts. For some of those, I would encourage participants to tune into a few of the other webinars that we've done where Dr. Shankle dives deep into some of the things that people can be doing to improve their lifestyle and slow these neurodegenerative conditions. But Doc, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
So I missed the beginning of the question.
I was just directing people to some of the videos that we've already done about prevent, things that they can do to slow progress of AD. The question was about the CSF draw and whether or not the results from that test will show the different things that you've hinted at in the last slide of this presentation. And then the second part was, what can a person do about it? So yeah.
Yes. Let's see. There, it's interesting. Let me just see if I can pull something up. Yeah. I think I may have it here. Yeah, so let me see if I can share this. So this is a just an example of what we do with the spinal fluid. On the left-hand side are the levels of an individual of the misfolded proteins. And at the time they were diagnosed, 68-year-old with one E4 gene. They had MCI, or mild cognitive impairment. And they had a combination of Alzheimer's disease, cerebral amyloid angiopathy, plus an additional degenerative disease that was characterized by an excess of a certain set of misfolded proteins called tau. Now, the blue bars indicated that this individual initially had high levels of amyloid, tangles, and the tau proteins. And then they were treated for 7 months with intranasal IgG, where there's a special inhaler that helps get the antibodies, somewhat like Leqembi, but these were antibodies from Privigen, where they cover many more different types of misfolded proteins. After 7 months, we were actually after a year, we repeated the spinal fluid. And on the right-hand side, what you see are the rates of change in the levels of these misfolded proteins. The tangles themselves decreased by 15% per year. The total tau proteins decreased by 17% per year, and the amyloid decreased by 19% per year. And that was with 7 months of treatment of the intranasal antibodies called Privigen. Now, if I had just used Leqembi, I would have seen a much bigger drop in amyloid, but it would not have touched the tangles and the tau misfolded proteins. And it's useful to know that amyloid is kind of like a match, like a match that you would use to start a fire. And the tangles are like the forest fire. So Alzheimer's spreads mostly through spreading of the tangles. So if you had to choose, you'd be much better off if you could block the spread of the tangles than blocking the amyloid alone. So this, I have other slides than I presented this previously, but this points out, one, that the clinically, commercially available antibodies like Privigen, they do in fact reduce the levels of many different misfolded proteins. And in subsequent slides, I've shown that this person's functional outcome also was stabilized, their cognition improved, and they showed rates of change in the brain volumes that had dropped back to the same as normal aging.
Okay, great. So thank you for everyone who's participating. We, as I mentioned, didn't have any questions when Dr. Shankle finished his talk, and we've been flooded since then. So very active participants now. Okay, let's see. So someone was surprised that grains are on the do not consume list. What is the rationale for that? Do you know specifically in terms of the nutritional value of the grains?
Oh boy,
I think you, Dr. Shankle, you've argued heavily in favor of. You're a big fan of the grains, despite the impact that they have on aging.
Well, I'm sure there's good arguments against grains, and I don't pretend to be a super expert in nutrition, so I suspect that some of the viewers are more knowledgeable than I am. I would say that as a general guideline, nuts are included in the Mediterranean diet, and certainly there's a strong amount of evidence that the Mediterranean diet does in fact lower the risk of Alzheimer's disease. For those of you who don't know the Mediterranean diet, the general guidelines are fruits, vegetables, roots, nuts. Olive oil turns out to be fairly significant as a risk reducer for Alzheimer's disease, and then a relatively low intake of saturated fat, dairy products, cheese, unfortunately ice cream. What can you say?
Fish is also good, right?
Yeah, fish, chicken.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. Someone commented that they read something in regards to napping affecting dementia. They didn't mention one way or the other whether it was napping, taking naps. I don't know if you've read anything about the impacts of
naps. You know, there's two sides to that coin. Yes, you have to ask the question, why is a person taking a nap? Are they sleeping well at night? Because we know that, for example, the Wisconsin Registry for Alzheimer Prevention had a study where they monitored an individual's sleep, and they then had them fill out questionnaires about the quality of their sleep. Namely, the most important question being, do you feel refreshed when you wake in the morning? Plus, how many hours of sleep a night are you sleeping? And they also did spinal fluid on everybody and measured the levels of the misfolded proteins as well as the levels of inflammatory molecules, because we know that inflammation is part and parcel of every disease process known to man. And what they found was the individuals who slept 7 to 8 hours a night, who felt refreshed in the morning, had the lowest levels of the misfolded proteins and inflammatory products. And that's where the basis of the recommendation for getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. But let's say you are sleeping 10 hours a night and you don't feel refreshed. Well, that suggests that the quality of the sleep is, there's something going on there. And in that case, it would be a very good idea to get a home sleep study. Places that many of the sleep centers now do home assessment, home sleep studies. They're very simple and easy to do, and they provide the necessary information to make any treatment changes in to improve the quality of your sleep, so that you give your brain a chance to remove all the waste products that accumulate, because the waste products are removed while you're sleeping at night. And so a good quality sleep assures that the process goes on well, and having enough sleep, i.e. 7 to 8 hours, removes more of the junk than having less sleep.
Got it. Okay, well, we are right at an hour. So on that note, Doc, I hope you get to play some tennis tonight, maybe if you haven't played already today, and you get a good night's sleep.
Thank you.
Same with all of the other attendees. Thank you to everyone for joining. And as mentioned, this video will be posted to the Shankle Clinic YouTube channel and also at the Shankle Clinic website on the homepage at some point in the next week or so. So if you didn't catch the entire thing or want to share it with someone, that is the place to go. And we wish you all the best of health and enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you, Connor.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Talk to y'all soon.
Good night, everybody. Sweet dreams.